careful, because the parts of yourself you've buried aren't staying silent. Have you ever felt like no matter how together you appear, there's something underneath, waiting to be seen? That quiet unease, that unexplained rage, that subtle shame? You hide it, repress it, rationalize it, but it doesn't disappear, it controls you. From the shadows. Carl Jung warned us, what we refuse to confront within ourselves doesn't vanish, it multiplies, it projects, it sabotages. And if you've ever wondered why your life feels stuck, why relationships repeat the same emotional cycles, why your soul feels split in two, this is why. But what if your pain isn't here to punish you? What if it's here to point the way home? You've spent most of your life being what others needed you to be, strong, kind, successful, acceptable. Whatever the script called for, you played the part. But deep down, you've always known something wasn't right. A feeling you couldn't explain, a tension that never left, like part of you was missing, or worse, imprisoned. You've smiled when you were breaking, said yes when your soul screamed no. You've stayed quiet to keep the peace, swallowed your truth to protect someone else's comfort, and every time you did, a piece of you disappeared into the dark. That dark place, that's the shadow. And if you're tired of feeling numb, if you're tired of pretending, of performing, of constantly managing the mask, you're not alone. The shadow isn't evil. It isn't your enemy. It's everything you've hidden to survive. The anger you weren't allowed to express, the grief you never gave yourself permission to feel, the desires you buried to avoid judgment, the dreams you abandoned because they didn't fit the life you were told to live. Shadow integration doesn't mean indulging those parts. It means listening, understanding, embracing. It means finally facing yourself without flinching. Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's not just a quote, it's a warning. Because right now, your shadow is making your choices. It's choosing your partners, it's shaping your fears, it's deciding what you believe you deserve. It's the silent architect behind the self-sabotage, the emotional reactivity, the cycles you swear you'll never repeat, but somehow always do. Why? Because what you don't acknowledge, you project. The resentment you carry becomes judgment toward others. The inadequacy you feel becomes jealousy. The wounds you've ignored show up as triggers, overreactions, passive aggression, or anxiety that appears out of nowhere. But here's the paradox. The very parts of yourself you've disowned hold the key to your wholeness. That rage you're afraid of? It's your boundary waiting to be claimed. That envy you feel? It's your unclaimed potential calling out for life. That fear you hide? It's a map leading you back to what matters most. And that shame? It's not the voice of truth. It's the echo of old conditioning, of childhood roles, of societal rules, of expectations that taught you love is earned by being someone you're not. Let that sink in. You were conditioned to reject parts of yourself in order to belong, but that belonging came with a cost. The cost was you. And now you're here, trying to figure out why nothing feels real anymore, why relationships feel hollow, why achievements feel meaningless, why even the moments of happiness feel fleeting and fragile. Because deep down you know the truth. You cannot feel whole when you're divided inside. This is the beginning of the journey Jung called individuation, not perfection, not transcendence, but wholeness. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who the world rewards, but your full, integrated self. Light and dark, known and unknown, strengths and wounds. It is the sacred reunion of your inner exiles. And it begins with awareness. So pause right now, breathe, and ask yourself, what part of me am I afraid to face? What do I judge most harshly in others? What emotion do I run from the fastest? The answers might not be comfortable, but they are clues. The shadow speaks in projections, in patterns, in triggers. It doesn't knock politely, it erupts, it repeats, it whispers through your resistance. And the more you ignore it, the louder it becomes. But here's the miracle most people miss. Your shadow isn't trying to destroy you, it's trying to free you. It wants your attention not to punish you, but to restore you. To bring you back to your true self. The self that existed before shame told you who you were wasn't enough. Before silence rewrote your worth. Before silence replaced your truth. This journey won't be linear, it won't be neat, it won't be safe, but it will be real. And the reward isn't just clarity or peace or power. The reward is you. Shadow integration isn't a goal you tick off a list. It's a lifelong practice of radical honesty. It's a relationship with yourself that evolves over time. And like any relationship, it requires presence, patience, and the willingness to see what's been hidden in plain sight. Most people want healing without the mess. They want growth without discomfort. But that's not how it works. The shadow doesn't respond to avoidance, it responds to truth. And the truth is, you've been fragmented for too long. You've compartmentalized your emotions, you've filtered your desires through what's acceptable, you've played it safe, made yourself smaller, and performed for love in ways you don't even recognize anymore. You've mistaken silence for strength. You've confused detachment with peace. But beneath all that, there's grief. Grief for the self you had to abandon just to survive. That grief is sacred. It's not weakness, it's memory. A memory of the person you were before the world told you to become someone else. When you begin shadow work, the first thing you'll notice is resistance. Your mind will try to distract you, your emotions will push back. You'll want to retreat, to rationalize, to say this is too much. But remember, resistance is a sign that you're getting close to something real. You're no longer living on autopilot. You're waking up. The unconscious will fight to stay unconscious. It fears the light, not because it's evil, but because it's used to being unseen, and seeing changes everything. Seeing makes you accountable, not for your trauma, but for your healing, not for what happened to you, but for how long you've let those old wounds define you. You can't change what you don't face, and you can't integrate what you refuse to acknowledge. Integration means choosing to stop fighting with yourself. It means making room at the table for every part of you, the angry one, the scared one, the jealous one, the insecure one. Because these parts aren't enemies, they are messengers. They hold your history, they hold your unmet needs, and above all, they hold your humanity. Think about how many times you've shamed yourself for being too much or not enough. Every time you judged your emotions, you strengthened the shadow. Every time you denied your need for love or rest or expression, you deepened the divide within. Society rewards this kind of self-repression. You're praised for being composed, unbothered, invulnerable. But Jung warned us, what you repress doesn't disappear. It becomes fate. It becomes the toxic partner you choose, the job that drains your soul, the anxiety that strikes out of nowhere, the sabotage you can't explain. The irony is, you think you're avoiding pain, but you're creating it, because suppression is suffering. Not dramatic suffering, but quiet suffering, chronic exhaustion, emotional flatness, a subtle disconnection from everything that once made you feel alive. You weren't meant to live this way. You weren't born to be a stranger to yourself. You were born whole. You were born with fire, curiosity, hunger, sensitivity, and the world taught you to hide it. But the soul never forgets. And that's why you're here now, searching for something deeper, something honest. Carl Jung said wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. This means you don't become whole by pretending to be only light, only kind, only peaceful. You become whole by embracing your contradictions. You become whole by facing your rage and discovering your boundaries, by facing your fear and uncovering your longing, by facing your shame and reclaiming your worth. This isn't about glorifying the shadow, it's about owning it, so it no longer owns you. And make no mistake, the shadow thrives in secrecy. That's why honesty is your greatest weapon. When you admit, I am jealous, jealousy loosens its grip. When you admit, I am afraid, fear softens. When you admit, I want to be seen, even when that feels vulnerable, your shadow begins to trust you. Because for the first time, you're not exiling it, you're listening. And what you'll hear in that listening is your true voice, a voice not shaped by guilt or performance, but by presence, by truth, by power. You may wonder, how do I begin this work? Start with your triggers. When someone irritates you beyond reason, pause. What are they activating in you? What unhealed wound is being touched? Next, look at your projections, the people you judge harshly, the traits you can't stand. Ask yourself, is this something I've disowned in myself? Often the answer is yes. And that moment of recognition? That's where the magic begins. Another way to meet your shadow is through your dreams. Jung believed dreams are the language of the unconscious. Pay attention to the symbols, the patterns, the figures that recur. They're not random. They're invitations to dialogue. And the more you listen, the more the unconscious begins to reveal its treasures. Because that's the secret no one tells you. The shadow doesn't just hold pain. It holds your gifts. Any of the qualities you repress, assertiveness, sensuality, ambition, creativity, aren't negative. They've just been labeled as such by a world that feared your power. Your shadow holds your vitality, your voice, your truth. And when you reclaim those parts, something extraordinary happens. You stop living in reaction to the world. You stop explaining yourself. You stop betraying yourself just to belong. And you begin to live aligned. Aligned not with an image or a role or an expectation, but with your essence. The more you align with your essence, the more foreign the old games of survival begin to feel. You no longer crave validation from the people who never saw you. You no longer feel the need to shrink yourself to avoid conflict or discomfort. Instead, something steadier begins to rise in you, a sense of inner authority, not loud, not aggressive, just solid, like a tree with roots deep enough to hold still during the storm. This is the fruit of shadow integration, not perfection, not constant bliss, but groundedness, presence, wholeness. But here's what no one warns you about. Integration is lonely, because the moment you stop abandoning yourself, you realize how many of your relationships were built on self-abandonment. You start to see the dynamics where you played the caretaker, the peacemaker, the silent one, the compliant one, and suddenly you can't go back. You can't pretend you're okay with being overlooked or manipulated. You can't fake small talk when your soul is starving for depth. You can't keep performing when your body wants rest and your heart wants truth. And yes, that shift can be disorienting. People may say you've changed, and they're right. You're no longer willing to betray yourself for belonging. You're no longer willing to dim your fire just to be palatable. That's the cost of wholeness. You outgrow roles. You outgrow illusions. You start choosing truth over comfort, integrity over approval, peace over performance. And the people who were only connected to your mask, they'll fall away. Let them. Because what comes next are relationships rooted in mutual truth, not mutual wounding. When you integrate your shadow, you stop looking for someone to complete you. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop bleeding for people who can't hold your depth, because you've gone into the underworld of your own psyche and retrieved what was lost, and now your presence carries weight, not because you speak louder, but because you're no longer afraid of your silence. You're no longer afraid of your own darkness, and that terrifies people who still are. Let's talk about the world for a moment. We live in a culture that thrives on suppression, toxic positivity, hustle culture. image over truth. It teaches you that if you're not constantly productive, you're worthless. If you're not smiling, you're ungrateful. If you're not agreeable, you're difficult. But here's the truth. A society built on masks will always fear authenticity. Your wholeness becomes a rebellion. Your integration threatens the systems that rely on your fragmentation. This is why shadow work is not just personal, it's political. Every time you reclaim a disowned part of yourself, you disrupt the narrative. Every time you choose authenticity over conformity, you reclaim your agency. This is not self-help, this is self-liberation. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned us that individuation requires confronting not just your personal wounds, but the collective ones too. So ask yourself, what beliefs have I inherited that keep me in fear? What cultural scripts have I internalized that pit me against my own instincts? What parts of me have I labeled wrong because they didn't fit the mold? These questions aren't easy, but they are the doorway, because integration doesn't happen in the intellect. It happens in the body, in the felt sense of being with what is rather than what should be. And when you begin to sit with your shadow, not analyze it, not fix it, but be with it, you start to realize something astonishing. You're not broken. You never were. You were just divided, separated from yourself, exiled from your truth, and every symptom, every panic attack, every depression, every rage outburst was your soul's protest. Its refusal to accept a life lived in fragments. This is the turning point, the moment you stop pathologizing your pain and start listening to it. What if your anxiety isn't a disorder, but a compass pointing to the lie you've been living? What if your sadness isn't weakness, but the mourning of your abandoned self? What if your rage isn't dangerous, but the part of you that remembers what boundaries feel like? When you make space for these parts, something beautiful happens. You start to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. That inner child, the one who felt deeply, dreamed vividly, questioned everything. She's still in there, he's still waiting, not for someone else to rescue them, but for you to return. For you to say, "I see you now, I hear you. You never had to disappear." And when you do that, the healing begins, not in some dramatic explosion, but in quiet shifts. You begin to speak up in places you once went silent. You begin to rest without guilt. You begin to cry without shame. You begin to say no and mean it. And maybe most importantly, you begin to forgive yourself for the years spent surviving, for the times you didn't know better, for the ways you betrayed yourself just to feel safe. Because self-forgiveness is at the heart of integration. You can't welcome back your shadow while punishing yourself for having it. You have to understand, those disowned parts didn't leave you, you left them. You believed they made you unlovable. But they are the very parts that make you whole. So no, this journey isn't easy. It will break your illusions. It will strip you bare. It will take you into the depths. But in those depths, you will find your essence. Not the curated version of you, the real you. And when that happens, the world begins to feel different. Not because it changed, but because you did. You stop being so reactive, so easily manipulated, so desperate for external validation. You stop chasing and start attracting, because the energy of someone who has met their shadow is unmistakable. It's calm, it's grounded, it's magnetic, and it scares the hell out of those who haven't done the work. But let it. You're not here to make everyone comfortable. You're here to be whole. When you stop being ruled by the parts of yourself you've denied, everything changes. You begin to notice how much noise there is in the world, how many people are talking without listening, how many relationships are built on mutual avoidance rather than mutual presence. You begin to see through the illusions that once held power over you. The need to be liked no longer overrides the need to be authentic. The urge to prove your worth begins to dissolve. You no longer shapeshift to earn acceptance because you finally realize You are the one you've been waiting for. This doesn't mean the shadow disappears. It doesn't mean you'll never be triggered again or face emotional storms. But the difference now is this: you respond instead of react. You stay with yourself instead of abandoning. You inquire instead of judge. That inner split, the one that kept you in a constant state of inner conflict, begins to heal. And with that healing comes an energy you might not recognize at first. It's subtle, quiet, but powerful. It's the energy of integration, of coherence, of soul. Jung wrote that the shadow is 90% pure gold. Most people never mine it because they only see the dirt. They only feel the discomfort. They stop at the pain and never reach the treasure. But you're not most people. You wouldn't still be here listening if you weren't ready to go deeper, if you weren't tired of the surface-level answers, if you didn't already know somewhere in your bones that your soul is not interested in performance. This hunger shows up in strange ways. You find yourself less tolerant of shallow conversations. You crave solitude, not as an escape, but as nourishment. You begin to reevaluate everything: your career, your relationships, your values. Because once the unconscious becomes conscious, you can't unsee it. And what once satisfied you, surface validation, chasing goals for approval, staying small for safety, no longer feeds you. You want substance. You want connection that touches the soul. You want to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And that's terrifying to a world that profits from your disconnection. There will be people who say you're selfish, dramatic, unrealistic. Let them talk. Most of them are just projecting their own unhealed shadows onto you. When someone has never met their own grief, your tears will threaten them. When someone has never honored their own truth, your honesty will feel like rebellion. When someone has never claimed their own power, your boundaries will be seen as arrogant. Don't let their fear become your prison. Instead, let their reactions sharpen your clarity. Let them reveal who is meant to walk this new path with you and who isn't. Because the deeper you go into your own psyche, the more sacred your energy becomes. You begin to understand that not everyone deserves access to your presence. Not everyone is ready to meet you without masks, and that's okay. This journey isn't about saving others, it's about reclaiming yourself. And you'll notice, as you reclaim yourself, your outer world begins to shift. You attract different people. Opportunities that align with your values begin to appear. Synchronicities become more frequent. You find yourself speaking with more confidence, not from ego, but from embodiment. There is a quiet power in someone who has nothing to prove. Someone who knows their worth not because the world affirmed it, but because they faced every part of themselves and didn't look away. But let's not sugarcoat it. This process will break you open. You'll mourn who you used to be. You'll grieve the years you spent asleep. You'll cry over the moments you betrayed yourself just to keep the peace. And that grief is necessary. It's holy. Because in that grieving you begin to create space. Space for the truth. For joy that isn't performative. For love that doesn't require self-abandonment. For creativity that flows from wholeness, not from wounding. Integration makes you an artist of the soul. Every wound you've carried becomes part of the masterpiece. Every shadow you've welcomed becomes a brushstroke. Every truth you've reclaimed adds depth to the canvas. And no, it won't always look pretty, but it will be real. And in a world starving for authenticity, your wholeness becomes a lighthouse. You start to inspire others not because you're trying to, but because your presence gives them permission. Permission to slow down, to feel, to question, to remember that healing isn't about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. So let this be your reminder. You are not too much. Your emotions are not a burden. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. Your wounds are not flaws. They're portals. They're invitations to go deeper, to live fuller, to love wider, to return to yourself. You are not broken, you're breaking open. And the pieces that fall away, they were never really you. They were masks, scripts, roles passed down through generations of unspoken pain. When you let them go, you're not losing yourself, you're finding her. You're finding him, the one who remembers, the one who feels, the one who creates, the one who knows. And in that knowing, you become dangerous, not in a violent way, but in a liberating way. You become immune to manipulation. You stop being a slave to approval. You can no longer be controlled by shame, because you've faced it, you've transmuted it, you've integrated it. This is what freedom feels like. Not the freedom to escape reality, but the freedom to be fully in it, awake, aware, whole. Freedom isn't about escaping your darkness. It's about reclaiming it, owning it, transmuting it into something that serves you rather than controls you. Because when you stop fearing your shadow, you realize it holds the keys to everything you were looking for. Your truth, your voice, your power. It's been there all along, buried under layers of survival strategies and social programming. You were taught to be good, polite, predictable. But your soul was never meant to fit inside the tight confines of societal approval. Your soul was meant to expand, to burn, to radiate something raw and undeniable. That rawness is your medicine, not just for you, but for the world. Because a healed individual doesn't just walk differently, they create ripple effects. Every time you speak your truth, you make it safer for someone else to speak theirs. Every time you choose authenticity over performance, you challenge the narrative. Every time you honor your intuition, your emotions, your boundaries, you remind others that wholeness is possible, not by climbing some spiritual ladder, not by transcending the human experience, but by descending into it, by being radically, painfully, unapologetically real. This is the sacred paradox Jung illuminated. You find the divine not by avoiding the human, but by embracing it. The divine lives in your anger, in your grief, in your longing, in the messy, magnificent process of being fully alive. And the more you welcome those parts, the less fragmented you become. The less reactive, the less dependent on others to mirror back your value. Because now, you've seen your own soul. And once you've seen it, you can't pretend to be asleep. People may not understand this transformation. That's okay. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be honest with yourself, to live with integrity, to show up in a world that wants performance and choose presence instead. And sometimes that means walking away from relationships that only love you when you're convenient, from environments that reward compliance but punish depth, from versions of yourself that were built to survive but not to thrive. Leaving those parts behind is not betrayal, it's evolution. And evolution hurts. It requires death. Death of the ego, of the roles, of the attachments that once made you feel safe. But in that death, there is also birth, a birth of something more authentic, more powerful, more you. Jung called this process individuation. It's not self-improvement, it's self-return. The shedding of everything you are not, so you can finally remember who you've always been. And it's not a one-time event, it's a spiral. You'll revisit the same wounds, the same patterns, the same triggers, but each time from a deeper level of awareness. You'll see them not as proof that you've failed, but as invitations to integrate even more, to love yourself even more. Because wholeness isn't a destination, it's a relationship, a commitment, to keep showing up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when it's ugly, even when no one else understands why you're doing it. You do it because you've tasted what it feels like to live in alignment. And once you've tasted that, nothing less will satisfy. So here you are, standing at the threshold. You've looked into your shadow. You've faced the parts you once feared. You've seen the truth behind your triggers, your patterns, your pain. And now the question becomes, what will you do with this awareness? Will you slip back into the familiar numbness, or will you step forward into a life that reflects who you truly are? That choice is yours. No one else can do this work for you. No one else can walk your path, but know this: you are not alone. Every soul on this journey is walking beside you, quietly, courageously, choosing truth over comfort, depth over distraction, wholeness over performance. And if you ever doubt your path, come back to this truth. You were never meant to be perfect, you were meant to be whole. That means you get to be messy and magnificent, brave and afraid, tender and fierce. You get to fall and rise, to grieve and create, to feel everything deeply and still choose to love. That's what makes you powerful, not your perfection, but your presence. So breathe, ground yourself, and remember, the parts of you you've been taught to fear are the parts of you that hold your freedom. Let them speak, let them move, let them reintroduce you to yourself. Because when you embrace your shadow, you don't just reclaim your life, you ignite your soul. And there's nothing more powerful than a soul on fire with truth.